The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Lee Hana stepped off the transport truck. Her boots hit the dusty ground with a soft thud, barely making a sound compared to the heavy footsteps of the male soldiers jumping down beside her. At 5 feet tall and weighing just over 100 pounds, she looked more like a college student than someone who had volunteered for South Korea's most demanding Special Forces program. Sergeant Kim Tae-ho stood at the front of the assembled group, his massive frame blocking out the sun. His dark eyes scanned the new recruits with the cold efficiency of someone who had broken down countless soldiers over his 15-year career. When his gaze fell on Hana, his expression shifted from neutral assessment to barely hidden disbelief. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for several nearby soldiers to hear. A few snickers rippled through the group. Hana kept her eyes forward, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had heard similar comments her entire life. Too small for basketball in high school, too weak for the construction job she had applied for after graduation, too fragile for military service according to her own parents. But here she stood, having passed the initial screening tests and physical requirements that had eliminated 60% of the male applicants. Standing to her left was Park Jin-woo, a former amateur boxer whose shoulders seemed to span half the width of a doorway. His thick neck and scarred knuckles told the story of countless fights both in and out of the ring. To her right, Choi Dong-min shifted his weight from foot to foot, his runner's build lean but powerful. Both men towered over her by more than a foot. "Listen up, maggots," Sergeant Kim barked, his voice carrying across the training yard. "For the next 6 months, this place will be your home, your church, and your hell. 50% of you will wash out before week 4. Another 25% will quit before graduation. The rest will either become Special Forces soldiers or leave in body bags during training exercises." His eyes found Hana again. "Some of you clearly don't belong here. Save everyone time and quit now." The message was clear, but Hana remained motionless. She had sold her car, used up her savings, and burned bridges with family members who thought she was crazy to get to this point. There was no going back. The first physical assessment began immediately. The recruits were ordered to run 5 miles in full combat gear carrying 40-pound packs. Hana had trained for months to prepare for this moment, running every morning before her job at a local factory and every evening after her shift ended. As the group set off at a punishing pace, she quickly fell behind the lead pack. Jin-woo and Dong-min ran near the front, their longer strides eating up ground effortlessly. Other soldiers passed her one by one, some muttering comments about how she was already holding everyone back. By mile 3, Hana's lungs burned and her legs felt like concrete blocks. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with dust to create streaks of mud on her cheeks. Several soldiers had already dropped out, sitting by the side of the track with their heads between their knees. The temptation to join them grew stronger with each painful step, but something deeper than physical strength kept her moving. Growing up as the smallest kid in every class, she had learned that quitting meant proving everyone right. Her father had been a factory worker who never got promoted because supervisors thought he was too quiet. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night because daytime jobs required confidence she had never been able to build. Hana had watched both parents accept limitations that others placed on them, and she had promised herself she would never do the same. She crossed the finish line in 38th place out of 42 remaining recruits. Her time was barely within the acceptable range, but she had finished. Sergeant Kim looked at his stopwatch and shook his head. "Pathetic," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you cannot run faster than that, how do you expect to carry wounded soldiers out of combat zones?" The afternoon brought weapons training. Hana had never held a rifle before enlisting, while many of her fellow recruits had grown up hunting or had previous military experience. The M16 assault rifle felt heavy and awkward in her small hands. When she tried to aim at targets 50 meters away, the weapon's weight made her arms shake. "Your target is that way, recruit," called out Corporal Yu Seung-min, pointing downrange, as Hana's shot scattered wide of the target. Laughter erupted from several soldiers, but Hana had always been a quick learner. She watched carefully as Jin-woo demonstrated proper shooting stance, noted how Dong-min controlled his breathing between shots, and observed the way experienced soldiers held their weapons. By the end of the session, Her accuracy had improved, dramatically, though she still ranked near the bottom of the class. That evening in the barracks, exhausted soldiers collapsed onto their narrow beds. Hana found herself assigned to a bottom bunk next to Song-mi Young, the only other woman in their training group. Mi-young was taller and stronger, a former college athlete who had excelled in every exercise that day. "Maybe you should consider transferring to communications or medical support," Mi-young said quietly as they prepared for sleep. "There is no shame in finding a role that fits your abilities better." The comment stung because it came from someone who should have understood the challenges they both faced as women in a male-dominated environment. But Hana recognized that Mi-young was trying to be kind, not cruel. "I will think about it," Hana replied, though she had no intention of transferring anywhere. As lights went out and the barracks filled with the sounds of tired soldiers settling in for the night, Hana stared at the bottom of the bunk above her. She could hear whispered conversations about who would wash out first. Her name came up more than once. The next morning brought hand-to-hand combat training. Paired with soldiers twice her size, Hana was thrown to the ground repeatedly. Her body collected bruises like medals, each one marking another moment where she could have quit but chose to stand up instead. During a break, she overheard Jin-woo talking to Dongmin near the water station. "I give her 2 more days," Jin-woo said. "She is tough, but this program will break anyone who is not physically ready. The instructors are probably just waiting for her to quit, so they do not have to kick her out officially," Dongmin replied. "Saves paperwork." Hana pretended not to hear, but their words added fuel to the determination burning inside her chest. She began staying awake after lights out, doing extra push-ups and sit-ups until her muscles screamed for rest. During mealtimes, she studied training manuals while others relaxed and socialized. 3 weeks into training, something unexpected happened during an obstacle course run. One of the stronger recruits, Nam Jun-ho, collapsed halfway through with severe muscle cramps. While other soldiers ran past him focused on their own times, Hana stopped. "Keep going," Jun-ho gasped. "Do not let me ruin your time." But Hana was already kneeling beside him, helping him stretch out the cramped muscles in his legs. She had learned basic first aid while working at the factory, where injuries were common. Within minutes, she had Jun-ho back on his feet. "Why? Did you help me?" he asked later. "Everyone says you need every advantage you can get." "Because that is what soldiers do," Hana replied simply. "We take care of each other." Word of the incident spread through the barracks. For the first time, some of her fellow recruits began to see past her small size to the person underneath. She was still called Little Bird behind her back, but the tone was shifting from mockery to something that almost resembled affection. By the end of the first month, Hana had found her rhythm. She would never be the fastest runner or the strongest fighter, but she had discovered advantages that others lacked. Her small size allowed her to move through tight spaces during stealth exercises. Her attention to detail helped her spot camouflaged targets that bigger soldiers missed. Most importantly, her refusal to quit was beginning to inspire a grudging respect from both instructors and fellow recruits. Sergeant Kim still shook his head when he watched her struggle with heavy equipment drills, but he had stopped making public comments about her presence in the program. The fact that she was still there after 30 days spoke louder than any words could. As Hana lay in her bunk at the end of week 4, listening to the sounds of soldiers who had become her reluctant brothers in arms, she allowed herself a small smile. Half the original recruits had already washed out, just as Sergeant Kim had predicted. But she remained, battered and exhausted, but still standing. The real tests were still ahead, and she knew the program would only get harder. But for the first time since stepping off that transport truck, Hana began to believe she might actually belong here after all. The cold mountain air bit at Hana's face as she adjusted the straps of her heavy backpack. 3 months of brutal training had transformed her body from soft factory worker to lean soldier, but she still looked tiny next to the men preparing for their first real field exercise. The mission briefing had been simple enough. Navigate through hostile territory in the mountains near the DMZ, gather intelligence on enemy positions, and return to base camp within 48 hours. Sergeant Kim Tae-ho stood before the assembled teams, his breath forming white clouds in the frigid morning air. "This is not training anymore," he announced. "Out there, mistakes get people killed. Enemy forces are played by our most experienced soldiers. They know these mountains better than you know your own neighborhoods. They will hunt you like animals." Hana was assigned to Team Bravo, along with Park Jin-woo, Choi Dong-min, and Nam Jun-ho, the soldier she had helped during the obstacle course weeks earlier. Their team leader was Corporal Yoo Sung-min, a veteran with 2 tours of duty who had made his opinions about female soldiers very clear during previous training sessions. "Listen up," Corporal Yoo said as he spread a map across a wooden table. "Jin-woo and Dong-min will take point positions. Jun-ho covers our 6. Hana handles communications and stays in the middle where it is safe." The assignment stung, but Hana had learned to pick her battles. She studied the map carefully while the others discussed patrol routes and checkpoint timings. Something about the terrain bothered her, but she could not quite identify what it was. As Team Bravo moved into the dense forest, Hana found herself surrounded by towering pine trees that blocked out most of the morning sunlight. The ground was covered with fallen leaves that crunched under their boots despite their attempts to move silently. Every few minutes, Corporal Yoo would signal for the team to stop while he checked their position against his compass and map. During the 3rd stop, Hana noticed something the others had missed. Fresh broken branches at shoulder height marked a path that was not on any of their maps. She approached Corporal Yoo carefully. "Sir, I think there might be enemy movement through that area," she whispered, pointing to the disturbed vegetation. "Focus on your radio, recruit," he replied without looking up from his map. "Leave the tactical observations to soldiers who know what they are doing." But Hana's factory job had required her to spot defects and irregularities that others missed. Her eye for detail had been one of her few advantages in civilian life, and she could not turn it off now. As they continued deeper into the mountains, she began cataloging everything that seemed out of place. 20 minutes later, Jin-woo almost walked directly into a camouflaged enemy position that had been invisible to everyone except Hana, who had spotted the unnatural arrangement of branches 50 meters away. She managed to signal him just in time, earning a grateful nod but no acknowledgement from Corporal Yoo. "Lucky catch," Dongmin whispered as they detoured around the hidden enemy soldiers. But it was not luck. Hana's small size allowed her to notice things at ground level that taller soldiers missed. Her years of detailed work had trained her eyes to pick up subtle patterns and changes. Most importantly, her position in the middle of the formation gave her a broader view of their surroundings than the point men who were focused on immediate threats. As the day progressed, Team Bravo successfully avoided 3 more enemy positions that Hana had spotted first. Each time she tried to share her observations with Corporal Yoo, and each time he dismissed her input while taking credit for the successful navigation. By afternoon, they had reached their target area, a valley where they were supposed to identify and report on enemy fortifications. The team took cover behind a rocky ridge and began their reconnaissance. Through binoculars, they could see what appeared to be a lightly defended camp with only 2 guard posts. "Looks easy," Jin-woo said. "We can get close, count their weapons, and be back to base by tomorrow morning." But Hana studied the scene more carefully. Something felt wrong about the setup. The guard posts were too obvious, too perfectly positioned for easy observation. The camp layout looked almost like it was designed to be seen from their exact position. "Sir," she said quietly to Corporal Yoo, "I think this might be a trap." "What makes you say that, recruit?" His tone made it clear he was asking only to humor her. "The sight lines are too perfect. In real combat, guards would not position themselves where they could be easily observed. And look at the supply tent placement. Everything is arranged for maximum visibility from this ridge." Corporal Yoo lowered his binoculars and studied the valley again. After several minutes, he began to see what Hana had noticed immediately. The entire scene was staged to draw them into a killing field. "Jun-ho, take the radio," Corporal Yoo ordered. "Call base and request permission to investigate alternative observation points." For the next hour, Team Bravo carefully worked their way around the valley, using routes that Hana suggested based on her analysis of the terrain. She had studied the topographic maps more thoroughly than anyone else, and had noticed several concealed positions that would provide better intelligence while keeping them safely hidden. From their new vantage point, they could see the real enemy camp hidden deeper in the valley. The obvious installation had indeed been bait, designed to lure reconnaissance teams into an ambush. Multiple machine gun nests covered the approaches to the fake camp, and several dozen enemy soldiers were positioned to surround anyone who took the obvious route. "How did you know?" Dongmin asked as they documented the actual enemy positions. "My old job required me to spot things that did not belong," Hana replied. This felt like when supervisors would set up fake defects to test quality control workers. That evening, as Team Bravo made camp in a concealed position, the dynamic between the team members had shifted subtly. Jinwoo offered to share his extra rations with Hana. Junho asked for her opinion on the best route back to base. Even Dongmin seemed to view her as more than just dead weight. But the real test came during the night watch. Hana was assigned the midnight to 2 a.m. shift, considered the safest time since enemy forces rarely moved during the coldest hours. She settled into position with the radio equipment, scanning their perimeter through night vision goggles. At 12:30 a.m., she detected movement that should not have been there. A team of enemy soldiers was approaching their camp using a route that should have been impossible to navigate in the dark. But Hana realized they were following a stream bed that was hidden from view during daylight, but provided a perfect concealed approach at night. She had two choices: wake Corporal, you and risk being wrong, or handle the situation herself. If she was mistaken, she would face punishment for false alarm. If she was right but failed to act, her entire team could be captured or killed. Hana made her decision. She quietly woke each team member and used hand signals to communicate the threat. Within minutes, Team Bravo had relocated to a secondary position that Hana had identified during their earlier reconnaissance. From their new hiding spot, they watched as a dozen enemy soldiers surrounded their former camp. The attackers had been expecting to find sleeping targets, but instead found empty sleeping bags and cold fire pits. After 20 minutes of searching, the frustrated enemy team withdrew. "How did you know they were coming?" Corporal Yu asked once the danger had passed. "I heard water splashing in rhythm like footsteps," Hana explained. The stream was the only approach route that our sentries could not see during daylight scouting. Dawn brought their final challenge. Team Bravo needed to return to base camp within 6 hours, but their planned route now seemed compromised. The enemy team that had tried to surprise them during the night was probably watching all the obvious paths back to friendly territory. Hana studied the topographic maps one more time, looking for alternatives that others might have missed. She found it. A series of steep ridgelines that would be extremely difficult to climb but would keep them above enemy patrol routes. "That route will take us 8 hours, not 6, Jinwoo pointed out. "We will miss our deadline, but we will arrive alive," Hana replied. "And I think I know a shortcut that is not on the maps." Her shortcut was a narrow canyon that she had noticed during their initial approach. It was too tight for vehicle patrols and too steep for large groups, but a small team could use it to cut 2 hours off their return time. Leading Team Bravo through terrain that would have been impossible for larger soldiers, Hana guided them safely back to base camp with 30 minutes to spare. They arrived exhausted but successful, carrying intelligence that revealed a major enemy deception operation. During the debrief, Corporal Yu gave a detailed report that highlighted every team member's contributions, including Hana's tactical observations and route selection. For the first time since joining the program, her name appeared in an official report for positive reasons. That night in the barracks, Jinwoo approached her bunk. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "I thought your size made you a liability, but you saved all our lives out there." "We are a team," Hana replied. "That is what teams do." But privately, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had proven that strength came in many forms, and that the smallest person could sometimes see the biggest picture. The nickname Little Bird was still used, but now it carried a different meaning. Birds, after all, could see the entire landscape from above, while those on the ground saw only what was directly in front of them. The field exercise had been her proving ground, and she had passed a test that was not measured. in push-ups or running times. She had demonstrated that intelligence, observation, and tactical thinking could be just as valuable as physical strength in combat situations. As she drifted off to sleep, Hana smiled slightly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she knew that she truly belonged here. Her fellow soldiers were finally beginning to see what she had always known, that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. The transport aircraft shuddered as it hit turbulence over the mountain range, and Hana gripped her weapon tighter. 6 months had passed since her graduation from Special Forces training, but this was her first overseas deployment. Around her, veteran soldiers dozed or played cards, completely relaxed despite flying into a combat zone. She tried to copy their calm demeanor, but her stomach churned with nervous energy. Staff Sergeant Oh Hyunwoo sat across from her, his weathered face showing the scars of 3 previous deployments. At 35, he had seen more combat than most soldiers would experience in entire careers. His eyes remained closed, but Hana could tell he was aware of everything happening around him. "First time overseas, little bird?" asked Kang Min-soo, using the nickname that had followed her from training. He was cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time since takeoff, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Yes, Sergeant," Hana replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "You will do fine," said Lim Jae-sung from the seat next to her. "Just remember your training and trust your team." The mission briefing had been straightforward. Their unit would establish a secure perimeter around a humanitarian aid distribution center in a region torn apart by civil war. Local armed groups had been attacking aid workers and stealing supplies meant for displaced civilians. The Korean peacekeeping force was being deployed to ensure safe passage for medical teams and food convoys. As the aircraft began its descent, Hana looked out. The small window at the landscape below. Scattered villages dotted the mountainous terrain, many showing signs of recent damage. Burned buildings and cratered roads told the story of a conflict that had been raging for over 2 years. "Listen up," Staff Sergeant Oh called out as the engines changed pitch for landing. "This is not a training exercise. Real bullets, real explosions, real consequences. Some of you have never been shot at before. When it happens, remember your training and do your job." His eyes found Hana. "That goes double for anyone who thinks this will be like the exercises back home." The base they were assigned to defend sat on a hilltop overlooking a valley where thousands of refugees had gathered in temporary camps. From the command bunker, Hana could see families living in tents made from plastic sheets and salvaged materials. Children played between the shelters while their parents waited in long lines for food distribution. Major Han Woo-jin, the operation commander, briefed the team on local threats during their first evening meeting. "Intelligence reports indicate 3 main armed groups operating in this area," he explained, pointing to positions marked on a large map. "They have been relatively quiet since we arrived, but that could change quickly." Hana studied the tactical map carefully, noting the locations of villages, roads, and natural terrain features. Something about the enemy positions seemed familiar, reminding her of the training exercises where she had learned to spot patterns and predict movements. "Sir," she said hesitantly. The attack patterns seemed to follow the valley roads. If they wanted to hit the refugee camps, they would probably use these routes. She traced her finger along several paths that converged near their base. Major Han looked at the map briefly. "Thank you for the observation, but our intelligence staff has already analyzed all possible approaches. Focus on your assigned duties, rather than strategic planning." Her assigned duties turned out to be maintaining communications equipment and providing rearguard security. While veteran soldiers like Min-soo and Jae-sung were posted at forward observation points, Hana found herself stationed in the communications bunker with backup radio gear. The only person who seemed to take her tactical insights seriously was Shin Yoo-jin, the unit medic. During their second week of deployment, she approached Hana during a quiet moment. "I read your training reports," Yoo-jin said. "Your instructors noted that you have good instincts for predicting enemy movements. Why? Do you think the major dismissed your analysis?" "Because I am still the smallest soldier in the unit," Hana replied, "and because I have never been in real combat before." "Neither had any of us before our first deployment," Yoo-jin pointed out. "Size and experience are not the same as intelligence." Their conversation was interrupted by incoming radio traffic. A convoy carrying medical supplies had come under attack 15 kilometers from their base. The driver was reporting multiple casualties and requesting immediate support. Staff Sergeant O quickly organized a response team. Min-Soo Jae-sung, you are with me. We take the armored vehicle and provide escort support. Everyone else maintains base security. As the rescue team prepared to leave, Hana studied the attack location on her map. The convoy had been hit at exactly the spot she had identified as the most likely ambush point during the initial briefing. The pattern was becoming clear, but she knew better than to voice her concerns again. The rescue mission returned 3 hours later with 4 wounded aid workers and news that painted a grim picture. The attack had been well coordinated, with enemy forces demonstrating detailed knowledge of convoy schedules and routes. 2 vehicles had been destroyed, and significant medical supplies had been stolen. They knew exactly when and where to hit us, Min-Soo reported during the debrief. This was not a random attack. Over the following days, similar incidents occurred with disturbing frequency. Supply convoys were ambushed at predictable locations. Patrols encountered resistance at specific choke points. Each attack showed signs of advanced planning and inside knowledge of peacekeeping operations. Hana began keeping her own tactical journal, documenting attack patterns and enemy movements that she observed. Her small size and rear guard assignment gave her opportunities to study the bigger picture, while other soldiers focused on immediate threats. During her 3rd week of deployment, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Enemy forces were not just attacking supply lines randomly. They were systematically targeting the routes that would be needed for emergency evacuation if the base came under direct assault. That evening, she approached Yu Jin with her findings. Look at this pattern, she said, showing the medic her hand-drawn maps. Every attack has been designed to cut off our escape routes. They are not trying to defeat us in direct combat. They are trying to trap us. Yu Jin studied the documentation carefully. This looks like preparation for a major assault on the base itself. That is what I think too, Hana agreed. But Major Han will not listen to tactical analysis from someone like me. Then we need to find another way to get this information. To him, Yu Jin said. The opportunity came 2 days later during a routine patrol briefing. Staff Sergeant O was explaining new security procedures when Yu Jin spoke up. Sir, I have been reviewing casualty patterns from recent attacks. There seems to be a systematic approach that might indicate larger plans. She presented Hana's analysis, without mentioning who had actually compiled it. Staff Sergeant O studied the maps with growing concern, his experience allowing him to quickly grasp the implications. This suggests they are planning something big, he admitted. Major Han needs to see this immediately. But when the analysis reached Major Han, his response was dismissive. Our intelligence sources have not reported any plans for major assault operations. These appear to be random attacks by desperate groups looking for supplies. That night, Hana lay in her narrow bunk, listening to the sounds of the refugee camp in the valley below. Children were crying, probably hungry or frightened by the constant threat of violence. Their parents spoke in hushed voices, discussing rumors and fears about what tomorrow might bring. She thought about her own parents back home, probably watching news reports about the peacekeeping mission and worrying about their daughter's safety. They had been so proud when she graduated from Special Forces training, finally understanding that their smallest child possessed a strength they had never recognized. But strength meant nothing if she could not use it to protect people. The refugees in the valley were counting on soldiers like her to keep them safe. The aid workers risked their lives every day to bring food and medicine to families who had lost everything. Yet she felt helpless, watching patterns emerge that others refused to see. The next morning brought news that confirmed her worst fears. Intelligence reports indicated unusual movement of enemy forces throughout the region. Radio chatter had increased dramatically, suggesting coordination between previously separate groups. Most ominously, civilian informants reported that local families were quietly leaving villages near the base, as if they knew something terrible was coming. Major Han called an emergency briefing for all squad leaders. We have received reports of increased enemy activity, he announced. However, Command believes this is likely preparation for attacks on other targets in the region. Our position remains secure. Hana wanted to scream. Every piece of evidence pointed toward an imminent assault on their base, yet the people making decisions refused to see the obvious pattern. She was trapped by rank, gender, and the assumptions others made about her capabilities. As the briefing ended and soldiers returned to their posts, she made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. If the leadership would not listen to her warnings, she would prepare for the attack in her own way. She began studying every defensive position around the base, memorizing locations of weapons caches and medical supplies. She mapped out evacuation routes that enemy forces had not yet compromised. Most importantly, she identified the most vulnerable points where an assault would likely focus. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the refugee camps, her preparations would prove to be the difference between life and death for everyone on that hilltop base. The first explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence like thunder, throwing Hana from her narrow bunk onto the concrete floor of the communications bunker. Before she could fully process what was happening, a second blast followed, then a third, each one closer than the last. The enemy assault she had predicted was finally beginning. Red emergency lights flickered on as the base alarm system wailed its warning. Through the thick walls of the bunker, Hana could hear the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds and the sharp crack of rifle fire. The attack was coming from multiple directions simultaneously, just as she had feared. All units to defensive positions, Staff Sergeant Oh Hyun-woo's voice crackled through the radio system. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Hana grabbed her weapon and equipment, her hands moving automatically through procedures, drilled into her during months of training. But training had never prepared her for the overwhelming sensory assault of real combat. The smell of smoke and explosives filled the air, mixed with dust from crumbling concrete and the metallic taste of fear. Outside the bunker, chaos reigned across the hilltop base. Enemy forces had somehow penetrated the outer perimeter during the night, positioning themselves for a coordinated dawn assault. Mortar rounds exploded with devastating precision, targeting key defensive positions and communication centers. Park Jin-woo, Choi Dong-min, and Nam Jun-ho had been assigned to the forward communications bunker, a reinforced position that handled coordination between different sections of the base defense. When a mortar round landed directly on top of their position, the explosion collapsed part of the concrete roof and trapped all 3 soldiers inside. "Bravo team, report status," Staff Sergeant Oh called through the radio, but only static answered. Hana could see smoke rising from the communications bunker 200 meters away. The structure had partially collapsed with concrete slabs blocking the main entrance. Worse, enemy snipers had positioned themselves with clear fields of fire covering the area around the damaged building. "Sir, Bravo team is not responding," reported Kang Min-soo from his position on the eastern wall. The communications bunker took a direct hit. Through her binoculars, Hana could see the tactical situation developing with terrifying clarity. Enemy forces had established overlapping fields of fire that turned the area around the collapsed bunker into a kill zone. Anyone attempting to reach the trapped soldiers would have to cross open ground while exposed to multiple sniper positions. "Jin-woo, can you hear me?" she called into her radio, hoping for any response from the trapped team. A weak voice answered through heavy static. "Hana, we are trapped under debris. Dong-min is hurt bad, and the bunker is filling with smoke. The entrance is completely blocked." Major Han Woo-jin's voice cut through the radio chatter with cold military efficiency. "All units maintain defensive positions. We cannot risk additional casualties for rescue operations until air support arrives." But air support was at least 2 hours away, and Hana could hear the desperation growing in Jin-woo's transmissions. The 3 soldiers had maybe 30 minutes before smoke inhalation would render them unconscious. After that, they would have no chance of survival. She studied the terrain between her position and the collapsed bunker, using skills learned during countless training exercises. The direct route was completely exposed, covered by at least 3 sniper positions that enemy forces had established during the night assault. Any soldier attempting that approach would be cut down within 50 meters. However, her analysis revealed something that the snipers might have overlooked. A drainage ditch ran from the motor pool area to within 20 meters of the communications bunker. The ditch was barely 2 feet deep, but it might provide enough concealment for someone small enough to use it effectively. Staff Sergeant, I can reach them, Hannah reported through her radio. Negative, came the immediate response. All personnel maintain current positions until reinforcements arrive. But through her earpiece, she could hear Jin Woo's breathing becoming more labored. Dongmin had stopped responding entirely, and Junho was coughing continuously as smoke filled their confined space. Time was running out faster than anyone realized. Hannah made a decision that went against every military protocol she had been taught. She gathered her medical supplies and prepared to move toward the kill zone, knowing that she might be the only person small enough to navigate the drainage system without being detected. "Little bird, what are you doing?" called Lim Jae-sung, who had spotted her preparing to leave her defensive position. "What I have to do," she replied, checking her weapon one final time. The first part of her approach required crossing 30 meters of open ground to reach the drainage ditch. Enemy mortar fire was concentrating on other areas of the base, but sniper rounds occasionally cracked overhead as she sprinted between destroyed vehicles and concrete barriers. A bullet shattered the ground inches from her left foot as she dove into the drainage ditch. Pain shot through her shoulder as she landed hard on the concrete bottom, but she was alive and concealed from direct observation. The ditch was even smaller than she had estimated from her position in the communications center. Built to handle rainwater runoff, it forced her to crawl on her stomach while dragging her equipment behind her. Broken glass and metal debris cut through her uniform, but she pressed forward toward the increasingly desperate radio calls from the trapped soldiers. "Hannah, where are you?" Jin Woo's voice was barely audible now. "We cannot hold on much longer." "I am coming," she whispered into her radio. "Stay conscious and keep talking to me." Halfway to the bunker, an enemy patrol passed directly over the drainage ditch. Hannah pressed herself against the concrete bottom, hardly daring to breathe as boots stepped just inches from her hiding place. The soldiers were speaking in urgent voices, probably coordinating the assault on other parts of the base. When the patrol moved on, she continued her crawling approach to the collapsed communications bunker. The final 20 meters required her to leave the drainage ditch and move between shell craters and debris piles, timing her movements to coincide with explosions that would mask any sounds she made. At the bunker, the situation was worse than she had feared. The main entrance was completely blocked by concrete slabs that would require heavy equipment to move. Smoke was pouring from gaps in the debris, and she could barely hear responses when she called to the trapped soldiers. "Jin Woo, I am at the bunker," she reported. "The main entrance is blocked, but I think I can get through a gap on the south side." "Be careful," came his weak reply. "The whole structure feels unstable." Hannah found a narrow opening between two concrete slabs that was just wide enough for her small frame to squeeze through. Inside the damaged bunker, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the smoke-filled space. She could see all 3 soldiers trapped under fallen ceiling panels. Jin Woo was conscious but weak from smoke inhalation. Dongmin appeared to have a serious leg injury and was drifting in and out of consciousness. Junho was alert but trapped under a concrete beam that was too heavy for either of them to move alone. "How did you get here?" Jin Woo asked through fits of coughing. "Same way I'm getting you out," Hannah replied, already assessing the medical situation and planning their evacuation. The smoke was getting thicker, and she could hear the concrete structure groaning under the weight of the collapsed roof sections. They had maybe 15 minutes before the entire bunker might collapse completely. Working quickly, Hannah administered first aid to stabilize Dongmin's leg injury and helped free Junho from the concrete beam. But getting all 3 soldiers back through the drainage ditch to safety would require multiple trips through the kill zone, each one more dangerous than the last. As she prepared to begin the most challenging rescue operation of her military career, enemy mortar fire intensified around their position. The assault on the base was reaching its peak, and every minute of delay reduced their chances of survival. "Jin Woo, can you move on your own?" she asked. "I think so," he replied, though his voice suggested otherwise. "Then we start now," Hannah said, helping him toward the narrow gap that led back to the outside world. "One at a time, and we all go home." Outside the bunker, the battle for the hilltop base continued to rage. But inside the collapsed communications center, 3 soldiers who had been written off as casualties were about to discover that their smallest teammate possessed a strength that had nothing to do with physical size. Lee Hana knelt beside Park Jin-woo in the smoke-filled bunker, watching, his face grow paler with each labored breath. The structural damage was worse than she had initially assessed. Concrete dust continued falling from the unstable ceiling, and the air was becoming more toxic by the minute. If she was going to save all 3 soldiers, she needed to move them, immediately. "Jin-woo, I need you to listen carefully," she said, gripping his shoulders to focus his attention. "I'm going to get you out first, then come back for Dongmin and Junho. Can you crawl if I help support you?" "I think so," he replied weakly, though his body was shaking from the effects of smoke inhalation. Hana had performed this calculation dozens of times during training exercises, but never under such desperate circumstances. Jin-woo weighed at least 70 pounds more than she did, and he would need constant support to navigate the drainage ditch back to friendly positions. The journey that had taken her 15 minutes to crawl alone would take at least 30 minutes with an injured soldier. She fashioned a makeshift harness from her equipment straps, creating a system that would allow her to pull Jin-woo through the narrow spaces while keeping both hands free to maintain her weapon. The design was crude but functional, based on techniques she had learned during medical training. "Dongmin, Junho, I will be back for you," she promised the other 2 soldiers. "Stay conscious and keep calling out if the structure starts collapsing further." The return trip through the kill zone proved even more challenging than her initial approach. Jin-woo's condition made stealth nearly impossible. He coughed frequently despite her efforts to muffle the sounds, and his movements were unsteady and noisy. Twice they had to freeze in place as enemy patrols passed nearby, her heart pounding as she prayed they would not be discovered. Halfway back to friendly lines, Jin-woo lost consciousness completely. Hana found herself dragging dead weight through the drainage ditch while enemy fire continued overhead. Her shoulders burned with exhaustion, and cuts from broken concrete had soaked her uniform with blood. But she kept moving, driven by the knowledge that 2 more soldiers were counting on her to return. "Little bird, what is your status?" Staff Sergeant Oh Hyun-woo's voice crackled through her earpiece. "1 casualty extracted," she whispered. 2 more to go." "Negative," came the immediate response. "Air support arrives in 40 minutes. Return to defensive positions and wait for reinforcement." But Hana could hear the desperation in Dongmin's radio transmissions. His leg injury was worse than she had initially thought, and he was losing blood at a dangerous rate. Junho was still conscious but reporting that smoke was getting thicker inside the collapsed bunker. She reached friendly lines and handed Jin-woo over to medic Shin Yu-jin, who immediately began treating him for smoke inhalation and shock. His vital signs were weak but stable, proving that the rescue had been successful. "You did it," Yu-jin said with amazement. "I did not think anyone could get through that kill zone alive." "I am going back," Hana announced, already preparing for her second trip. "That is insane," Yu-jin replied. "You barely made it once. The enemy will be watching for you now." But Hana had studied the sniper positions during her first journey and noticed something that might give her an advantage. The enemy shooters were focused on obvious approach routes, expecting rescue attempts to follow predictable military tactics. Her unconventional use of the drainage system had caught them off guard once, but they would be more alert now. However, she had observed a pattern in their patrol schedules. Every 20 minutes, the enemy soldiers repositioned to avoid counter-sniper fire from the defensive positions. During those brief moments of movement, there would be gaps in their coverage that she could exploit. The second rescue proved more difficult than the first. Choi Dongmin's leg injury made it impossible for him to crawl under his own power. Hana had to create a more sophisticated harness system that would allow her to drag him while protecting his damaged leg from further injury. She also had to work faster. The concrete structure was becoming increasingly unstable, with larger pieces of debris falling regularly. Junho reported that cracks were appearing in the remaining support beams, suggesting that complete collapse was imminent. "Dongmin, I know this hurts, but we have to move now," she said as she secured the harness around his torso. Just leave me, he replied through gritted teeth. Save yourself and Junho. No soldier left behind, Hana said firmly, repeating the motto that had been drilled into every Special Forces recruit. We all go home. The journey back with Dongmin tested every limit of her physical endurance. His injury made him heavier and more awkward to maneuver than Jinwoo had been. Blood from his leg wound created a trail that enemy trackers might follow. Worst of all, he occasionally cried out in pain despite her efforts to minimize his suffering. At one point, an enemy patrol came so close that she could hear their radio communications clearly. They were discussing the strange reports of movement in areas that should have been impossible to reach. One soldier suggested that Korean forces might be using tunnels or underground passages that were not marked on their tactical maps. Hana pressed herself and Dongmin against the concrete bottom of the drainage ditch, hardly breathing as Boots stepped directly over their hiding place. A flashlight beam swept back and forth just inches above their heads, but the soldiers moved on without discovering them. When she finally delivered Dongmin to the medical station, Yujin immediately began emergency treatment for blood loss and shock. His condition was serious but manageable thanks to the field dressing that Hana had applied before beginning the evacuation. One more, she announced, already turning back toward the kill zone. Hana, stop, Staff Sergeant O called out, his voice carrying clear authority. That bunker could collapse at any moment. You have already saved 2 lives. Do not throw your own away for a third. But through her radio, she could hear Junho's increasingly panicked reports. The smoke was so thick now that he could barely see his own hands. Parts of the ceiling were falling regularly, and he was trapped in an increasingly small pocket of survivable space. I am not leaving him, she said simply. The third rescue would be the most dangerous yet. Enemy forces had begun to recognize that someone was moving through their lines using routes they had not anticipated. Patrols were more frequent and more thorough in their searches. Worse, the collapsed bunker was now obviously unstable, with visible cracks running through the remaining concrete supports. But Nam Junho was the soldier who had supported her when others doubted her capabilities. He had been the first to show her genuine respect during training, and he had defended her tactical observations when others dismissed them. She owed him more than military duty required. As she prepared for her final journey into the kill zone, explosions continued to rock the base around them. The enemy assault was reaching its peak intensity, but air support was still 20 minutes away. If the base was going to survive this attack, every soldier would be needed for the final defense. Yet Hana knew that military victory would mean nothing if she abandoned a teammate who was counting on her. The rescue mission that had started as a desperate gamble was about to become the defining moment of her military career. She checked her equipment one last time, whispered a prayer to whatever forces might be listening, and began her third trip through the hell that the kill zone had become. Behind her, Jinwoo and Dongmin were alive because she had refused to accept that some missions were impossible. Ahead of her, Junho waited in a collapsing bunker, trusting that the smallest soldier in their unit would somehow find a way to bring him home. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the morning air as Lee Hana emerged from the drainage ditch for the final time, supporting Nam Junho's weight across her shoulders. His breathing was shallow and labored from smoke inhalation, but he was alive. Behind them, the communications bunker finally collapsed completely, sending up a cloud of concrete dust that would have buried anyone still trapped inside. Air support had arrived exactly as promised, and enemy forces were already retreating from their positions around the hilltop base. The coordinated assault that had threatened to overrun the peacekeeping mission was falling apart under the precision strikes of attack helicopters and fighter aircraft. But for the soldiers gathered around the medical station, the most important victory had already been achieved. 3 men who should have died in that collapsed bunker were breathing, thanks to the courage of someone they had once dismissed as too weak for combat duty. Medic Shin Yujin worked frantically to stabilize Junho's condition while monitoring the other 2 rescued soldiers. Park Jin-woo had regained consciousness and was sitting up despite his oxygen mask, watching Hana with an expression of complete amazement. Choi Dong-min's leg injury would require surgery, but doctors confirmed that her field treatment had prevented permanent damage. "I cannot believe you came back for me," Junho whispered when he was finally able to speak clearly. "We are a team," Hana replied, the same words she had used countless times during training, but now they carried weight that had been forged in combat rather than theory. Staff Sergeant Oh Hyun-woo approached her as she sat on an ammunition crate, finally allowing exhaustion to show on her face. His weathered features displayed an emotion she had never seen from him before. Deep, genuine respect. "What you did today was beyond anything taught in training manuals," he said quietly. "I have served with soldiers twice your size who would not have attempted what you just accomplished." Word of the rescue spread through the base faster than radio communications could carry it. Soldiers who had survived the enemy assault gathered to hear first-hand accounts from witnesses who had watched Hana make 4 separate trips through active combat zones to save her teammates. Kang Min-soo, who had initially questioned her presence in the unit, stood before the assembled soldiers and described what he had observed through his binoculars. "She moved through that kill zone like a ghost," he reported. "Enemy snipers never even saw her coming. I watched her drag soldiers twice her weight across terrain that would challenge a pack mule." The story became more remarkable with each telling, but the essential facts remained unchanged. A soldier weighing barely 100 pounds had single-handedly rescued 3 trapped teammates from a collapsed bunker surrounded by enemy forces. She had done it by defying direct orders, using unconventional tactics, and refusing to accept that the mission was impossible. Major Han Woo-jin arrived at the medical station 2 hours after the rescue operation concluded. His expression was unreadable as he approached Hana, who immediately stood at attention despite her obvious exhaustion and injuries. "At ease, soldier," he said, then paused for a long moment before continuing. "I owe you an apology. Your tactical analysis of enemy attack patterns was completely accurate. If I had listened to your warnings, we might have been better prepared for this assault." "Sir, I was just doing my job," Hana replied. "No," Major Han said firmly. "You were doing far more than your job required. Your actions today saved 3 lives and demonstrated tactical thinking that our intelligence specialists missed entirely." The Major's public acknowledgement marked a turning point in how Hana was perceived by the entire unit. The nickname Little Bird gradually gave way to something new. Soldiers began calling her Phoenix, recognizing how she had risen from their low expectations to achieve something extraordinary. Jin-woo, who had regained his strength over the following days, made a point of publicly crediting Hana with saving his life. "I was ready to die in that bunker," he told anyone who would listen. "The smoke was so thick I could not see my own hands. Then I heard her voice on the radio telling me help was coming. I have never heard anything more beautiful in my entire life." Dongmin's recovery took longer due to his leg injury, but he used his time in the medical facility to write a detailed report describing Hana's tactical innovations during the rescue. His account would later be studied at military academies as an example of creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. The rescue operation became legendary, not just within their unit, but throughout the entire Korean peacekeeping force. Military journalists interviewed Hana for articles that would appear in defense publications back home. Her photograph, showing her small frame dwarfed by the combat gear that had carried her through the kill zone, became a symbol of courage overcoming physical limitations. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. A week after the rescue, Hana received a handwritten letter from the mother of one of the refugees in the valley below their base. The woman had heard about the soldier who had saved 3 lives during the enemy attack. "My children were so frightened during the fighting," the letter read in broken Korean. "But when they heard that such a small person could be so brave, they felt safer. Thank you for showing them that heroes come in all sizes." Staff Sergeant Oh recommended Hana for the Distinguished Service Medal, the highest honor available for her actions during the rescue operation. The citation would read, "For extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty while serving in a combat zone. Despite direct enemy fire and against explicit orders, Sergeant Lee Hana single-handedly rescued 3 trapped soldiers from a collapsed structure, making multiple trips through hostile territory while displaying tactical innovation and personal courage far beyond the call of duty. The medal ceremony took place 6 months later at the main military headquarters in Seoul. Hana's parents sat in the front row, tears streaming down their faces as they watched their smallest child receive recognition for saving 3 lives. Her father, the quiet factory worker who had never been promoted, stood and saluted when her name was called. But for Hana, the real transformation had nothing to do with medals or public recognition. She had discovered that true strength came, not from physical power but from the courage to act when others believed action was impossible. The girl who had been branded too weak for combat duty had proven that determination could overcome any limitation. The 3 soldiers she had saved became her closest advocates within the military hierarchy. They ensured that her tactical observations were taken seriously in future operations. They recommended her for advanced leadership training. Most importantly, they made sure that every new recruit heard the story of the day when the smallest soldier in the unit had carried 3 fighters out of the kill zone. Years later, when Hana became an instructor at the Special Forces training facility, she would tell her own students that combat revealed the true character of every soldier. Some discovered they were not as strong as they had believed. Others learned they were capable of far more than anyone had expected. Physical strength matters, she would say to classes that included soldiers twice her size. But it matters less than you think. What matters most is the strength of your commitment to the soldiers fighting beside you. Her legacy became a reminder that heroes often emerge from the most unlikely places. The military that had once questioned whether she belonged had been transformed by her example. Standards were adjusted to recognize different types of strength. Training programs were modified to value intelligence and determination alongside physical power. But perhaps the most important change was in the minds of soldiers who learned that their smallest teammate might also be their greatest asset. In a profession that had always celebrated size and strength, Hana had proven that courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable commitment to fellow soldiers could accomplish what physical power alone never could. The kill zone that had nearly claimed 3 lives became the proving ground where a new understanding of military heroism was born. And at the center of that transformation stood a soldier who had refused to accept that being small meant being weak.